एंड वेलकम टू RCI नवशिखर चैनल। आप सभी का RCI के नवशिखर चैनल में बहुत स्वागत है। आज हम वापस हैं अपने एक एक्सपर्ट के साथ और एक नए टॉपिक के साथ। फॉर आवर व्यूअर्स, इफ दे वांट टू कॉन्टैक्ट अस रिगार्डिंग एनी ऑफ देयर क्वेरीज or if they want to share any information with us, they can contact us at our toll-free number 1800-112008. Our phone number is 265-11613 and our fax number is 265-11609. Moving on, आज का हमारा टॉपिक ऑफ डिस्कशन है informal assessment for children with learning disability. And to adapt this discussion, we have our experts, Bipasha Mukherjee. She's one of the heads of the Orchids multidisciplinary clinics. Welcome to RCI, ma'am.
Thank you.
Moving on to the topic for today, that is informal assessment for children with learning disability. Informal, that is something not as formal, that is not standardized, which does not have something set, or does not have the set information with it, that we have to follow them for the assessment. Now moving on to what is assessment. किसी भी चीज की जांच करना, किसी इंसान की जांच करना, किसी इंसान की किसी भी प्रॉब्लम को लेके जांच करना, उसे हम बोलते हैं assessment. Now children with learning disability. Learning, किसी चीज को समझना, याद करना, रिटेन करना, इसको हम बोलते हैं लर्निंग. डिसेबिलिटी, उसमें वो क्षमता ना होना. तो आज हम बात करेंगे उन बच्चों के बारे में जिनको प्रॉब्लम होती है पढ़ने में, जिन्हें प्रॉब्लम होती है किसी भी छोटी छोटी बातों को समझने में. इनके हम बात करेंगे इनकी जांच कैसे करते हैं. नॉट बाय द फॉर्मल असेसमेंट टूल्स, नॉट बाय स्टैंडर्डाइज्ड रूल्स, बट एक जनरल जो कि हम अपने ऑब्जर्वेशन से उनका असेसमेंट करते हैं. नाउ आई वुड लाइक टू आस्क मैम फर्स्ट. मैम, एक जनरली अगर हम बात करते हैं तो लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटी क्या होता है, कैसे हम उसको डिफाइन करेंगे?
Learning disability, the main thing is that it's not a visual disability where you can see a child and understand that there's something wrong with him. It's, as you know, it's a neurological processing disorder wherein you can hear well, you can see well. If you go for an eye test or if you go for a hearing test, there'll be nothing wrong with your hearing and seeing. But by the time your brain is processing, the information is getting through your senses, there's a disconnect over there. So that is why you may be very intelligent. Their children are of above average intelligence. They are not the slow learners, they are not children with low IQ, but they are unable to learn in a conventional classroom. Why they are not being able to learn? Each child is very different. You can't slot everybody together. So we have to find out the whole process through the process of assessment, as you are explaining. We have to find out what is wrong with each and every child so that we can cater to his or her needs particularly.
Okay. So what do we start today?
We'll be starting with what the process of assessment is before, so that it opens up into how can we go about doing that. Okay. The assessment process. Assessment is a systematic process of gathering information about a child. A comprehensive assessment is one in which the child's past and current levels of performance, his strengths and weaknesses are revealed. The assessment needs to be relevant to the teaching goals and interventions that a child will receive. The parents and teachers have to view assessment as an empowerment tool, as it helps them to advocate for their child. Assessment has to be an ongoing process which needs to be repeated at suitable intervals. So understanding the process of information, we have to keep in mind that it's a systematic process. You can't just suddenly think one day that I'm going to do an assessment. You have to prepare for it. So it's systematic. There are certain ways of moving around doing that, and it's very comprehensive. That means we want to look into every aspect of the child in which we can help them out. So we have to be looking at their current and past levels of functioning to figure out where he's functioning so that we can exactly plan our goals accordingly. When we are planning our goals, it's important for us to know that all children will surely have some strengths. Working on their strengths, we can help them overcome their weaknesses. Then an assessment has to be an ongoing process. It can't happen once and stop there. Once we have started assessment, we have started intervention, we have made our goals and plans accordingly. We have to assess that also. Is it working with the child? Is there something I need to do more? Is the rate okay, or should I speed it up? And at the end of the day, when we tell parents that the children need to be assessed, it's not so much for getting a label. The idea is they have to see it as an empowerment tool, as in learning that once they know where the child stands, what he can do, what he cannot do, they will be better able to put across the child to the teachers, to the school, so they also know what to do with the child. So it is an empowerment tool in that sense, that you learn something from it and you can use that knowledge to help the child.
तो हम एक ओवरऑल उसका उसका असेसमेंट कर लेते हैं, एक ओवरऑल उसके बारे में जांच कर लेते हैं कि क्या उसकी स्ट्रेंथ्स हैं, क्या उसकी वीकनेसेस है, कहाँ हमें फोकस करना है, कहाँ पे हमें ध्यान रखना है, और जो प्रोसेस होना चाहिए वो एक ऑनगोइंग प्रोसेस होना चाहिए कि बीच बीच में ब्रेक्स और ये सब नहीं होने चाहिए,
कि एक बार होके खत्म नहीं हो जाती है बात, आपको फिर से दोहराना पड़ेगा. टाइम पीरियड शायद वेरी करे, 1 साल के बाद या 6 महीने बाद आपको भी असेस करके देखना कि आपने जो शुरू किया है वो सही तरीके से चल रही है कि नहीं. वही उसी को देखने के लिए
रीवैल्यूएट हमें
कर लेते हैं.
ओके मैम. तो मैम आगे क्या है?
Approaches to assessment. We have a formal assessment and informal. Under the formal assessment, there are standardized tests, which are the 3 main areas we look into are general intelligence and aptitude, achievement, behavior and personality. They are administered by trained professionals like clinical psychologists. They can be expensive, and most of the tests, because they are begun abroad, they have a different cultural context. In an informal assessment, it's non-standardized, it's simple to construct and administer as well as score. It's tailor-made. The methods are observation, interview, questionnaires and tests, and it can be administered by teachers and other professionals who are working with children. So this is to understand that why informal assessment over formal assessment. Like formal assessment, we know that if a child needs a formal assessment, we can go to a clinical psychologist. But again, those are standardized tests. It is made for a lot of children. It's not made for any one particular child, and it has certain norms and it has a certain way of scoring. So it has its limitation, it has its advantages also, and it can be administered only by a clinical psychologist, yes, because they qualify to do the test, and it is expensive. There's a cost you have to pay for it. As well as culturally, there are some differences in the context, in the sense that these tests, most of them, as we know, they're either UK based or they're based in the United States of America. So some of the pictures, some of the questions, they tend to be different to our Indian context. So it wouldn't be fair to be testing children on these bases. In an informal assessment, the advantages are that it is not standardized. As in, you can't say that this has been used on 10 children or 100 children. So there's a flexibility over there, and but at the same time, it can be very diagnostic, as in you're watching the child very carefully through observations, through a questionnaire. So there are various methods of taking information about the child, and then it's very simple to construct. I mean, given a time span of half an hour or 1 hour, I can tailor make it according to the child I'm going to assess, if I know these are the difficulties. And at the same time, it can be administered by teachers and other professionals who are working with the child, like a special educator or an occupational therapist, similarly.
मैम, जैसे आपने इसमें वर्ड यूज किया टेलर मेड, मैम इसका क्या मतलब होगा? टेलर मेड, जैसे आपने इसमें इनफॉर्मल असेसमेंट में बात करी है, मैम इसका क्या टेलर मेड से क्या हम?
टेलर मेड का, like I said, children with LD are very varied. You can't say that a child, even if he's dyslexic, two dyslexic children are never the same. Okay, so if I know that the strength of this child with dyslexia could be that he's a visual learner, so I can make a test which is visually based. Okay. If in another case I know he's an auditory learner, I can make a test which is auditorily based. So I can make it according to the child's need.
Okay. So in that formal, we cannot change these.
Yeah, because it's a norm test. You can't change it around. You have to
administer it standardized.
The way it is. Yes.
Okay. तो मैम, हम इसमें आज हम बात करेंगे इनफॉर्मल असेसमेंट की. We'll be talking about specifically on the informal.
Yeah, the areas under which we can test a child.
So ma'am, what are the different methods that are used in the informal?
There are paper pencil methods. Also, there's observation. It's a overall process. I mean, we start at something, and then during the test, there are a lot of aspects of observing the child, looking at samples of the child, questionnaires with the parent, with the teachers who are dealing with the child, to gather as much as information possible to make a proper diagnosis about the child.
So, जैसे मैम like in case of a formal, there is a certain norm being put up.
Yes.
These are the things you have to ask, or these are the things you have to take it in the test.
Yeah.
And this is the way the scoring is going to be. So how is the scoring in informal?
A scoring in informal, you can develop it on your own. Like, there has to be some kind of a scoring for you to come to a decision, as in whether a certain area is of concern for a child. Supposing there are 10 items in a particular worksheet that you're doing with the child. Supposing he scores 2 out of 10, then you know there's something's wrong over there. But if he gets, say, 5 and above, and he's functioned pretty well on it, then you know that, okay, it's not an area of concern. So again, the scoring has to be developed by the teacher according to the level. Like, it could be a child in prep standard, it could be a child in class 5. So accordingly, you can work around it. That's why it's informal.
And like in case, ma'am, we have 2 teachers, both of them are given 1 child.
Yes.
To assess, the informal assessment to be done. Ma'am, like there are 2 people with different mindset, with different way of thinking and different way of perceiving things. So in that case, क्या ma'am जो उनका scoring होगा, जो उनका assessment होगा, वो different नहीं हो जाएगा एक ही बच्चे के लिए?
Look, when we say that it's not standardized, it doesn't mean that you can just make it in a flimsy manner also. It has to have some kind of a framework. That basic framework has to be understood by both the teachers, so that, as you are saying, there should not be a discrepancy between the way she can assess and another teacher can assess. There has to be a basic framework, but again, that framework can be worked around. It's not as rigid as a standardized test. That's the reason why. Areas of informal assessment are visual perception, auditory perception, language areas, mathematics, and graphomotor skills. Like, as you were saying, we need a framework. In that framework, these are the areas we assess when we are doing an informal assessment: visual perception, auditory perception, language areas, mathematics, and graphomotor skills. So over this, we are going to create an assessment tool to assess a child informally. Visual perception. What is it? It is the brain's interpretations or decoding of the information that it receives from the eyes and ears. For example, you see a flower. The eyes transmit the shape, color, size of the object seen, and in your brain it translates into a flower. So the act of seeing has to be decoded by the brain for us to make sense of all we see around us. We have to understand what perception is first. Our sensory organs, like our eyes or our ears, are basically signal receptors. Yes, when we see a flower, for example, we are just seeing the color of it, we are seeing the shape of it, and we are seeing something about the flower, we are seeing the various aspects. So the eyes are just sending those signals to our brain. By the time it reaches our brain through our nerve passages, the brain puts all this information together and interprets it or perceives it that yes, we are seeing a flower, whether we are seeing a sunflower or whether we are seeing a rose. That's what the brain understands for us. Okay, so sometimes we are seeing well. I mean, if you are to do like a child with visual perception problems, that there's nothing wrong with his vision. His eyes are seeing and picking up the signal. In the passageway from the eyes to the brain, somewhere there's a disconnect in the nerves. That is the reason why what he perceives finally may not be the same. Like, for example, if he's seeing a B and he thinks it's D, it's nothing. He's not seeing B as a D. The seeing is fine, but the time the signal goes to his brain, he's seeing it as a D.
उस चीज को समझने में प्रॉब्लम है, देखने में
प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. जब तक आपके दिमाग को ये समझ आ रही है क्या है, कहीं पे कोई डिस्कनेक्ट है, इसलिए आप वो बी को डी देख रहे हो. Auditory perception, similarly, what we hear as sound signal with our ears has to be decoded by the brain into whether it's a language or music from a piano. Hence, both these areas have to function well to help us learn. Each of these have sub-areas. Now, it is important to note that sensory deficits are not the same as perceptual deficits. Similarly, for auditory perception, whatever our ears are picking up, those are the sound signals is picking up and it is going to our brain. Yes. So if you are hearing a language, if we know, we can understand that okay, it's English language. If it's a foreign language you haven't heard of, but you're hearing all of it, you can't understand it because your brain doesn't have any information regarding that language. Similarly, if you hear a piano playing somewhere or a tabla playing somewhere, you can hear the sounds and you know in your head that okay, that's a piano or that's a tabla playing, because your brain has interpreted it or perceived it as that sound. But we have to remember one thing which is very important, and I'm stressing it again. Either a visual or a auditory perceptual deficit is not the same thing as a sensory problem. It's nothing wrong with my seeing, there's nothing wrong with my hearing. Okay, I would like you to look at these pictures and pick out all the creatures which are green over here. So the moment I say that, you start looking at, there's a green parrot, there's a green frog, there's a green fish, there's a hummingbird, there's a seahorse, and there is a snake over here. So what we just now did is a figure ground perception, the ability to pick out an object, word, letter or number from the background surrounding it. To do this, it requires the eyes to focus on and identify specific objects, words, letters, numbers between others.
So मैम लाइक अभी हम बात कर रहे थे अबाउट द ऑडिटरी थिंग, तो ऑडिटरी के केस में मैम फिगर ग्राउंड परसेप्शन का कैसे हम लोग
we are looking at the visual areas now, because here I am showing you something, it's visual. Auditory is very here. When you are presenting something in auditory, you are not supposed to be seeing anything, you are expected only to hear. So this is the first area in visual, which is figure ground perception. There are sub areas I said, so this is the first one, figure ground perception.
इसमें जैसे जो background है उससे वो
yes, against the background of something, when we are expected to focus on something, like it could be a number, it could be a word, or it could be any object. Like here in the first picture I asked you, pick out everything that is green in color. So you are looking at a lot of things, but the moment I said green, you focused on things which were only green. Okay. So problems reflected in schoolwork, in case you have a problem with figure ground perception, is difficulty keeping his or her place while reading or in number work, loses his or her place when copying from the blackboard or textbook, unable to find objects that are sometimes right under his or her nose, difficulty looking up words in a dictionary or places on a map, difficulty picking out things in a complex picture. They don't see the difference between addition sums and subtraction sums when presented on the same page. So if you have a figure ground perception problem, as I said, figure ground perception is the ability to focus on something. If you are unable to focus, that is what happens when you have a lot of visual material in front of you, whether it's a textbook, yes, where you have to find a certain answer, whether you have to find a certain word in the dictionary, or if you have to go to so and so place and you're seeing a map. To be able to find that place on that map, you have to focus on a particular area. So if you have a figure ground perception problem, some of the places, some of the areas in schoolwork you'll have a problem is if you're copying from the blackboard. Each time you look up, what happens? You miss out where you had last stopped. You have to keep looking again and again because your focus is not in the right place. Now looking at this picture, we'll ask the children to look at how many triangles they can see over here. So they now start focusing on whatever, wherever they can see triangles. They can see that the sandwich is like a triangle, the flags in this castle are like a triangle, then arrow has a triangle, the umbrella has a triangle, the house roof has many triangles, the ice cream cone is a triangle, the piece of cake is a triangle. So here we are looking at a certain shape, which now we are going to speak about the visual area called form constancy perception, which is the ability to identify, name and sort the same object, shapes and symbol despite differences in their size, shading, texture or position. So here we are speaking of form constancy. In form constancy, we mean to say that you are able to recognize a form, whether it is a letter, whether it is a shape, whether it is a symbol. Say a symbol like number 9, a symbol like the letter A. Yes, so you are able to look at A, whether it is in a different color, whether I have written it in red color ink or whether I have written in blue color ink, but still you see A and you know A because of the way it is formed. So it's a form constancy. If you see a triangle, whether it is a triangle as a sandwich, whether it's a triangle as a flag, still you can see that yes, it's a triangle. It might be the objects may be different, but the shape is the same. So it is called as form constancy perception. In case if a child has form constancy perception problems, the areas in schoolwork which will be affected are difficulty recognizing a shape he or she knows well when presented in a different way, example in a different color or material or in a 3D form. Difficulty projecting the idea of a shape onto something familiar, example like a door is a rectangle. Fails to recognize letters, words or numbers presented in a different writing style. Difficulty recognizing that a math sum written vertically is the same when written horizontally. Limited sight word vocabulary. Difficulty recognizing words in vertical forms like in a crossword. Sometimes they confuse in similar looking words like clock, clear, click, cling because all of them begin with the same CL letters. So a form constancy is not really restricted to shapes. Like when you're reading, when you see a word, like see the word the, like sight word. When I said sight word, I mean words like the, is, and, which come up again and again in a reading. So each time when you look at them, you can't look at them as a new word. You see the and you know the. You have to remember it as a full form. So children who have this form constancy perception problems, their reading is not as fluent as normal readers because each time they look at it, they can't remember the form how the is. Because it's a sight word, you have to remember it according as a picture. Similarly, when you say, like look into this room and see where are the rectangles you can see. He can't understand that a rectangle can be present in a door also, in a blackboard also, in a book also. He can think of it only as a rectangle drawn on a page. So he is unable to project that form of a rectangle onto something else. So learning becomes restricted after a point.
Okay. Ma'am, I'd like to interrupt you here.
Yeah.
So till now we were talking about our topic, that is informal assessment for children with learning disability. हमने स्टार्ट किया था अबाउट क्या प्रोसेस होता है एक असेसमेंट का, हमें क्या क्या चीज़ें ध्यान में रखनी चाहिए. एक असेसमेंट में हमें ये चीज़ देखनी चाहिए कि उसका जो भी स्ट्रेंथ है, वीकनेसेस है, वी आर एबल टू मेक दैट आउट. हमें वो चीज़ें पता चले उसके बारे में जब भी हम असेस करें, जब भी हम उस बच्चे की जांच कर रहे हैं. हमें ये चीज़ पता होनी चाहिए कि जब हम उसको देख रहे हैं तो उसकी क्या क्या चीज़ें, क्या क्या उसकी वीक चीज़ें हैं, कहाँ पे हमें ध्यान देना है, कहाँ पे हमें फोकस करके उसे ज़्यादा स्ट्रेस देके उसका चीज़ इम्प्रूव करवानी है. फिर हमने बात की थी क्या क्या अप्रोचेस होती हैं एक असेसमेंट में. असेसमेंट दो प्रकार के होते हैं, एक फॉर्मल और एक इनफॉर्मल. इसके बारे में हमने बात किया था. फॉर्मल होता है जो स्टैंडर्डाइज होते हैं, जिसके सर्टेन नॉर्म्स होते हैं, जो जिस रूल्स पे बेस्ड होता है कि इस बेसिस पे आपने जांच करनी है, इसके अलावा आप कोई चेंज नहीं कर सकते हैं. इनफॉर्मल होता है जहाँ पे कोई एक रूल नहीं बना होता है. इट डिपेंड्स कि एक टीचर कैसे उस बच्चे को डील करता है, कैसे उसकी जांच करता है. फिर हमने बात की थी डिफरेंट एरियाज जहाँ पे इनफॉर्मल असेसमेंट होता है. इसमें हमने बात कर रहे थे विजुअल एंड ऑडिटरी की. विजुअल में हमने बात की थी फिगर ग्राउंड परसेप्शन की, जिसमें कि एक बच्चे को पता होना चाहिए कि ये बैकग्राउंड है, इस बैकग्राउंड के ऊपर ये चीज लगी है. जैसे एक वॉल के ऊपर पेंटिंग लगी होती है तो वो उस चीज को अलग अलग कर पाए कि पीछे वॉल है और ऊपर एक पेंटिंग है, ये एक चीज नहीं है. फिर हमने बात की थी फॉर्म कॉन्स्टेंसी परसेप्शन की, जिसपे हमने बात किया था चाहे कोई भी हमने उसको कोई चीज सिखाई है, तो अगर जैसे एक अल्फाबेट है बी, तो जो बी लेटर है वो अगर उसने एक बुक से सीखा है तो नेक्स्ट टाइम अगर किसी और बुक में बी लिखा होगा तो वो उसको बी ही समझेगा, उसका चेंज नहीं होगा कि बी उसी बुक में लिखा है. तो अभी तक हम इस टॉपिक पे बात कर रहे थे. we'll continue our discussion after a short break.
हम होंगे कामयाब, हम होंगे कामयाब, हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन. ओ मन में है विश्वास, पूरा है विश्वास, हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन. We shall overcome, we shall overcome, we shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. We shall overcome someday. We shall overcome someday.
कोई मुश्किल हो, दूर मंजिल हो, never stops us from dreaming. हारता है वो, हार माने जो, we are what we believe in. हम धरती को अंबर से मिला दे, हम उड़ सकते हैं, उड़कर दिखा दे, हम छू ले सितारों को. We can touch the sky. आशा के पंखों पे we can and we will fly. We can and we will fly.
This is Aparna. She loves chess and Shah Rukh Khan. Her best friend is Swati. She also has visual impairment.
La 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 la
This is Neeraj.
la. हवा धीरे धीरे चल रही.
He plays many instruments.
सुनो जो कहानी
He loves Mohammad Rafi and cricket.
ये कहानी सदियों पुरानी है. ये कहानी हमें सुना.
He also uses crutches for mobility.
धीरे धीरे
चंदा है तू मेरा सूरज है तू
This is Raj Bala.
मेरी आँखों का तारा है तू जीती हूँ मैं बस तुझे देख कर
With her husband and daughter. She loves cooking and watching TV.
सूरज है तू आ मेरी आँखों का तारा है तू
She also has cerebral palsy. Look beyond the disability. Look at the person.
वेलकम बैक आफ्टर द ब्रेक. ब्रेक पे जाने से पहले हम बात कर रहे थे इनफॉर्मल असेसमेंट फॉर चिल्ड्रन विद लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटी. उन बच्चों के बारे में जिनको समझने में, किसी चीज़ को याद करने में प्रॉब्लम होती है. हमने बात अभी तक कर ली थी कि क्या असेसमेंट होता है, किस किस तरीके के असेसमेंट होते हैं, क्योंकि आज हम बात कर रहे हैं इनफॉर्मल असेसमेंट की, जिसके कोई सेट रूल्स नहीं होते जिनको हमें फॉलो करना होता है. उसके बारे में हम बात कर रहे थे. फिर उसके बाद हमने देखा था कि क्या क्या डिफरेंट एरियाज हैं जहाँ पे हम लोग इनफॉर्मल असेसमेंट कर सकते हैं. वी वर डिस्कसिंग अबाउट द विजुअल परसेप्शन. मैम, ओवर टू यू.
So far we spoke about form constancy. Now we are going to move on to visual discrimination. Visual discrimination is when you're given two similar looking things. Yes, like over here that two pictures, you have to find out like what's different. They look similar in the beginning, but then if you start looking at it, you can see that the cat is in another position, the clock is showing another time, the picture is upside down, books are closed, a flower vase is at the edge of the table, there are no curtains.
मैम जैसे हम लोग न्यूज़पेपर्स में भी आती थी बहुत सारी
Exactly, find the differences.
Find the difference. तो just to improve on the
Yes, to your ability to look at what is different and what is same. So that's exactly what visual discrimination is. So you see, visual discrimination is the ability to see differences and similarities. That means there are certain things which look similar to us, but again they are slightly dissimilar or different in shapes, patterns and objects around us. And as you said, but we used to do these things in newspapers, right? So if a child has problems in visual discrimination, some problems that you can see in schoolwork are difficulty in classifying things. That means he struggles to see similarity and differences, like whether all vegetables are same, how are fruits different. He won't be able to see the difference between these two. Confusion between U and V, M and N, R, N and H, P and Q and G. Misreading words, substituting words or omitting words. Difficulty discriminating between symbols used in mathematics, greater than, lesser than, plus sign, multiplication sign, division sign and the subtraction sign. Difficulty distinguishing money by size of the coins. Difficulty in differentiating between acute and obtuse angles. Difficulty in sorting out geometric shapes. So when you have a visual discrimination problem, everything will look similar to you, though they are not always similar. There are certain differences. You will not be able to make out those differences. So in school work, when we ask you to sort something, when you see which is the odd one out. So supposing you are seeing three balls in which one has dots, the other one also has dots and the third one has dots, but there might be some difference in that. But for you it will all look same. Then especially for children with dyslexia, one of the learning disabilities, what happens is they see some of the letters as same, especially B and D. We call it a reversal problem where B looks like D to them. P and Q look same. They look somehow same, but the directionality is different or the way they're written, slightly something is different, but for these children they're unable to see that at a glance and understand it. So sometimes when they're reading, they tend to omit a word in the sense that they think they've already read it, or they substitute it. Supposing they see the word they, but they think that it is the and they will read it as the. They can't see that they is read as THEY. They will read only THE and they will say it's the. So that is what we say by substitution. Omission is when you have left it out altogether. And then these children again have problems in understanding in maths where they have a problem in understanding the plus and the multiplication sign. It looks similar suddenly when you see, yes, and subtraction and a division sign. So they might see it as division and they might divide in the sum instead of doing a subtraction. Then greater than and lesser than. Yes, they have confusions in understanding which is the greater than and which is the lesser than sign. So these are some of the problems which will, they might seem very small and little to us, but children who have these problems, these are the areas where they are having problems in. Yeah.
तो ये प्रॉब्लम हमें उनमें से आती है जहाँ पे हमें चीजें सेम एक सी दिखती हैं बट वो होती नहीं है एक
आप उसमें अंतर नहीं पता चलता आपको क्योंकि आपको सब सेम दिखाई देता है. Okay, now over here the child is shown certain pictures and then they have to guess what these are. Like the first picture is of an elephant, but you only see the only first two legs of the elephant are shown. The next one, it's a TV, then it's a tortoise, a pumpkin, a road roller, a bottle and a clown's face. So here I have not shown you the full picture, I have shown you only a part of the picture. When you see a part of a picture and you are able to say what the whole picture is, it's called visual closure perception, which is the ability to identify an object, a shape or a symbol from a visually incomplete presentation. It includes the ability to complete incomplete parts of a figure or a picture and the ability to see that certain parts make a whole. Visual closure perception. When we say closure is our ability to close something. That means you're not seeing the full part of something, you're just seeing a part of a picture where there is a I showed you only the legs of an elephant, but you know how a whole elephant looks. That is why even seeing an elephant's legs, you know that it is an elephant. You see a bottle, you see only part of the bottle, but you have the picture of a whole bottle in your mind. That is why even if I show you a part, you can see it. If I show you part of my fingers, you can just see this part and you know that I'm talking about it's a hand. Okay, so it's important for us to function in our life, because when we see something, it's not always that we are seeing everything around us. Part of it we see and we know what the rest is. Yes, so it's an ability where you see a part of something to be able to understand what the whole is. So understanding part and whole, that a full picture is made up of small parts. So you see a part and you can visualize the whole picture. So it's called visual. You can close the picture. So visual closure perception. Now if you have problems in visual closure perception, some of this which can be seen in schoolwork are the following. Difficulty combining phonic combinations to build a word. Difficulty in completing a drawing or a letter if you are given only a part. Reading only half a story during a comprehension. Struggling with fractions. Difficulty breaking up words into syllables visually. The children do not read full examination questions. Difficulty thinking of a complete article when doing construction activities. Omitting the end of words in reading and writing. So over here we are seeing activities which require us to be able to see a part of something to think of what the whole is. Whether it's in reading, when you're reading you see parts of word, like supposing you're seeing a word like clock, you can see CLOCK, all put together it is clock. Okay, so even if I were to show you only CL and O, you can read the word and then you can know that it's clock without reading till the end. That's how we read as fluent readers. You know, once we are fluent in reading, when you're reading a storybook, you are not always reading the full word. Like when we see a word because, we just see BE and C and you know it is because. You don't have to read till the end of the word. That is visual closure. So when you're doing maths, a child will have problems in understanding fractions, because fractions is what? Whole and part. They cannot understand that half is part of a whole. So if I say half an apple means one half, they can't understand that, you know, this half has come out of this whole thing. Then when you're doing Lego activities, when you play as children, when you have to do work with building blocks, you're given a picture. You see that picture, you have to know that you have to put each block together to make one whole little house, or you can make a car with that. But if I'm unable to understand that, how that whole thing will be made, I can't see that so small parts can make that whole. Jigsaw puzzles. In a jigsaw puzzle, you're given many parts put together. You have to see the whole picture and then you have to know, okay, I have to put these together to make one whole jigsaw puzzle.
मैम जैसे कि हम अपनी रोज की लाइफ में भी देखते हैं, हमें दूर से हमारा कोई फ्रेंड खड़ा हुआ है तो उसके पीछे अगर वो अपना बैक से ही खड़ा हुआ है तो हम उसे पीछे से ही पहचान जाते हैं कि ये है या फिर ये है.
आपने पूरी नहीं देखी,
पूरा नहीं देखा, उसको इवन आगे से भी नहीं देखा है, पीछे से ही हम उसको पहचान जाते हैं, या अगर वो साइड से खड़ा हुआ है तो भी हम उसको पहचान सकते हैं. हम वही चीज विजुअल क्लोजर में आप बता रहे हैं.
Here we ask the child to identify or color the fish which are swimming right green and left red. So if a child has to do a worksheet like this, he will have to know his own right and he'll have to know left to be able to apply it while doing this worksheet. Yes, so this area where the child needs to know his own left and right to be able to apply it is called as position in space perception. Position in space perception means the ability to understand the position of an object, but that is in relation to one's own body, understanding your own left, right, top, bottom. So in our everyday lives, when we have to do something, we have to use a sense of direction, a sense of position. We have to understand that yes, this is my left and this is my right. Yes, if I don't understand my left and right, I will not be able to function as in knowing when to do what next. Right? So for this, if a child has a problem in understanding position and space perception, some of the areas he will be having problems when he is doing a schoolwork is putting things away upside down or wrong way around without noticing, poor grasp of spatial terms, example understanding in, out, over, above, below, through, under, between, etc. So difficulty carrying out instruction with these terms correctly. Poor judgment of spacing in writing, disorganized on paper because they confuse between top, bottom, left, right of a page, poor ability to organize his or her desk, confused direction in sport games and has difficulty positioning himself or herself, and problems in map work because they're confused between north, south, east, west. So as you can see over here, when you have a problem in understanding your own left, right, your own body perception, which is your left side, which is your right side, what is behind you, what is in front of you, who is next to you, yes, you cannot apply these same terms in everyday tasks that you do. And it's a very important aspect, because if you're traveling somewhere, you have to give direction, and somebody says, like sometimes the teacher says, children, please take out your book, please write the date on the left hand side of the page. Yes, I want you all to write the number of the page on the right hand corner. If a child doesn't know his right hand corner and his left hand corner, he cannot apply it on the page, and then he's not able to proceed in the task. So following instructions become very difficult, because when we are giving instructions, there are always some point of directions put into it. Similarly, when you tell the children, like, I want all of you to make a line next to the wall on my right. If the child doesn't know which is his right side, he will not be able to carry out the instructions, and the teacher will think that this child is not listening to me. On a sports field, you see, when you're playing cricket or when you're playing football, they are expected to be positioned in various places. The coach will tell you, you have to stand on the right side of so and so, or you have to be standing on the right side of the fence. So if a child doesn't know his directionality, he'll have a problem doing that. On map work also the same thing will happen, because north south is understanding top, bottom, again west and east, right? So functioning every day, whether it is in a social context or whether it's in an academic context, it will become difficult in that sense.
तो मैम लाइक जो हमारा सेंस ऑफ काइनेस्थेसिया एंड प्रोप्रियोसेप्टिव होते हैं वो इसमें काम आते हैं.
जी हाँ.
एंड मैम जैसे अगर हम किसी बच्चे को ऐसे भी बोलते हैं कि हाथ ऊपर करो, मैम जैसे एक्सरसाइज करवाते हैं छोटे बच्चों को तो भी बोलते हैं, तो उससे वो चीज डेवलप करी जा सकती है कि हाथ ऊपर करो, हाथ नीचे करो.
कौन सा हाथ, वो आपको बताना पड़ेगा. जैसे आप कोई ड्रिल कर रहे हो, जैसे ड्रिल फॉर्मेशन में क्या होता है, मार्च पास में क्या होता है, आप लेफ्ट राइट बोलते हो. अब जिस बच्चे को अपनी लेफ्ट राइट का पता नहीं चलता, he'll be disturbing the whole other line, isn't it? Because आप साथ में कुछ कर नहीं पाओगे, तो वो मुश्किल हो जाता है.
तो ये सिर्फ राइट लेफ्ट का कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं, और जो कहीं पे भी हमारे स्पेस में कहीं पे भी जो हाथ पैर का मूवमेंट करना होता है उसके लिए भी होता है. ओके.
In this next picture we are going to be seeing is where we are going to be looking at certain animals and where they are. Look who's where. So where is the cow? Now if we are looking at a cow and we are looking at where, we are asking you where the cow is. So we can see here that the cow is next to a farmhouse. Similarly, where is the pig? The pig is sitting in the mud. Where is the goose? The goose is standing on the grass. Where is the rooster? The rooster is on top of the roof. Where is the horse? He is behind a tree. Where is the cat? The cat's on the fence. So here we are looking at other objects in space, where they are, between the relationship between two of them. This is known as spatial relationships perception, which is the ability to understand the position of two or more objects in relation to oneself and to each other. It includes the ability to identify left and right on one's own body and apply it to objects, the ability to understand directions. So here the difference between the earlier one, which was position in space, where you have to know your own body ability of left and right. Here it is about other things in space. To understand that on this table there is a book kept over here. So understanding the relationship of space between the book and the table. Okay, that the book is on the table. The table is in this room. Yes, and there is a screen behind me. So understanding other things in space over here, so that when you have to keep something, again when you have to follow direction and your teacher tells you please keep your books on the table near the door, so you have to figure out which table is she talking about. Is the one which is near the door. So understanding spatial ones. The first one was your own position in space. This is about other objects in space around you. So if you have a problem in understanding this, some of the school problems that you will see in such children are difficulty organizing objects in relation to one another. Example, put the book on top of the table, or what is it on the left of the gate outside. Incorrect sequencing of letters and numbers. Example, swim will be written as, instead of writing SIWM, the child will write it as SIWM. Then 240 will be written as 204. Difficulty in telling time or poor sense of time. Difficulty in lining up vertical sums correctly. Difficulty in graph related activities because you have to understand x and y axis graphs. Difficulty giving directions or following a map or diagram. Poor drawing skills because the paths will be scattered or they will have incorrect orientation. So again, when we don't understand directionality terms, we are not able to apply them. Like we won't be able to carry out direction as in understanding where to place objects in our environment. So we look very disorganized, like you won't know when to put in what and where. So when you are given directions on a map, you see a map and you will not be able to understand, okay, if I go here, okay, the shop next to, there's a left turn next to the shop or there's a right turn next to the shop. You can't understand the left or right of the shop and the road over there, so you'll have a problem understanding that. Then when we remember spelling, like some of us are visual learners, we remember spelling. Like if you have to remember the spelling of swim, you remember as S-W-I-M. So after W, I will come, then comes M. But if you have a problem in spacing that, you won't remember does I come before W or does it come after W. So then if you look at a number like 240, where you know that 2, after 2 comes 4, then comes 0. Instead you will write it as 204 because you can't remember which came before and which came after. So all these, though they look very small, when it comes to overall functioning, there will be some kind of a perceptual deficit over there.
तो मैम लाइक इन केस जहाँ पे हम बोलते हैं कि फर्स्ट वाले में बात की था पोजीशन इन द स्पेस, जहाँ पे हम अपनी स्पेसिंग की बात करते हैं, इस पे हमने बात करी है कि दूसरी चीजों की इन रिस्पेक्ट टू अस भी एग्जाम्पल के तौर पे कि अगर मेरे आगे यहाँ पे पेन रखा हुआ है तो दैट इज कि मेरे सामने रखा हुआ है, तो ये चीज मुझे अंदाजा है कि ये मेरा स्पेशल रिलेशनशिप डेवलप्ड है, ये इंटीग्रेटेड है. ठीक है मैम.
Okay, looking at these pictures which are jumbled up, we have to order the steps from making to eating a pizza. So you can see that all the pictures are jumbled up. So the first one over here, even if a child doesn't know or hasn't ever made a pizza, but he can visually see and understand which can come first. For example, the first thing he will have to do is to roll out the dough or the atta, and then he will have to put the pizza in a pan. Once he has done that, he can spread the sauce or the base of the pizza. Then he will add the toppings, all the vegetables. He has to bake it in the oven, and the last thing that he has to do is he has to eat it over here. So here a certain sequence was there, but it was all jumbled up. So this area we are going to speak about, and in the next picture also we see over here, we'll ask the children and look at these pictures very quickly. Yes, maybe for 30 seconds or maybe for 20 seconds, and then we'll ask them that you have to remember what you have seen, how many of the things you can remember. So what we just worked on is visual memory. Visual memory are of two kinds, is visual sequential memory and visual non-sequential memory. But basically both of them expect us to have the ability to recall or reproduce, whether it's a number, a letter or object or a figure that has been previously seen for a short period of time, like 1 second or 30 seconds, and to remember what has been seen. Visual sequential memory is the ability to remember and immediately recall or reproduce a sequence of objects, letters, words or other visual symbols in order of presentation. And in non-sequential memory, it is the ability to remember and immediately recall objects, letters, words or other visual symbols in random order. So here we are speaking about memory. When we are speaking about memory, our memory is, some things are there which we have to remember in a sequence. For example, the sequence of remembering how you get ready for school in the morning. Obviously, you can't eat your breakfast first. You will get up, you will brush your teeth, then you will take a bath, and then you will wear your school uniform, and finally you will eat something maybe before you go out. So if I were to show you pictures, remember it is visual, in the sense that you may not have done it, but just seeing the visual sequence, one thing cannot happen before the other thing happens. There is a certain order, there is a certain progression. You can't jump the sequence. So like we did making of a pizza, what happens is you can't see that the child is eating it at the end. You have to first make it. So how do you go about making it? You can't bake it straight away. You can't put the toppings first. Before the toppings, the sauce has to come. Before the sauce has to come, where will you put it? You'll have to put it on a base. How will you make that base? You have to roll out the dough. So even just seeing the visual pictures, the child is able to understand that this has to happen first. This can only follow after that has happened, and it continues. So in a lot of things, like when you're doing biology, when you're doing seed germination, yes, just seeing the pictures, the child is able to understand that a plant cannot suddenly grow. First the seed will be in the mud, then slowly one root will come out, after that the shoot will come out, after that two leaves will come out, and finally a little plant is going to come out. Yes, so he can just see the visual sequence and understand that it cannot jump. The shoot cannot come out before the root. So just seeing the visual picture, he can make out that a sequence is happening. This is when something is in a sequence or an order. But in random also, which is non-sequential memory, there's so many things we keep seeing around us. The things that we keep seeing around us, we have our own ways of remembering them. Like I showed you a picture where a lot of things were there. There were some people in it, there was some food in it, there were some places, there were some objects. So you have to find your own ways of remembering randomly. That means if you were hungry at that point of time, you would have remembered all the food. If you are a person who likes people, you would remember, oh, a doctor. Maybe you have to go to the doctor in the evening. So you see the doctor and you remember, okay, there was a doctor over there, right? Or if you have been on a holiday and you will remember the beach. So we have our own ways, which is called memory pegs of remembering, which is very important because everything that we learn in our everyday life is not following a sequence. Some of the things we have to remember randomly. So both these areas of perception are very important, sequential and non-sequential. So now if you don't have visual memory as such, there will be some problems you will come up in schoolwork, and we will discuss them. Some of the problems in visual memory, if you have problems in this perception area, is difficulty reproducing numbers and shapes, because you can't visually recall them or you can't remember how they look. Make errors when copying and slow in copying from the blackboard, because when you are copying from the blackboard, we are looking up and back. Difficulty following a sequence of events to solve a problem. Example, a mathematical problem. Difficulty in remembering a sequence of events correctly, and difficulty telling a story in the correct sequence. So what happens is our visual memory we are using all the time, because we are seeing everything with the eyes, we are seeing everything, we have to remember how it is. So a child who can't, his visual memory is poor, when he is looking up on the board, each time he has to look up for one word. Supposing he is seeing the word recall. If he can remember the whole thing like a picture, he can write it without looking up. Otherwise, what happens? He'll have to look up for R, he will have to look up for E, for C, A and L. So what happens? He's lagging behind in his work. He'll write very slowly and he'll never complete work in class. Then when you have to do something in a sequence, say for example, if you have to do long multiplication or you have to do multiplication, you have to remember, I start multiplying from the ones house, carry over, bring down. It is a sequence. You can't jump the sequence. The moment you jump the sequence, your sum will be wrong. Then when you have to see a story and say it, you see the stories, you can't remember, because visually you can't remember. Okay, say supposing the thirsty crow. In the thirsty crow, what happens? First the crow was thirsty. He found a pot of water. The water was too low. He put stones into it. So you can't say that the thirsty crow drank water. How did he drink water? He found water, it was too low, then he put in the pebbles. So you have to remember the sequence. So if you are unable to remember sequence, or if you are unable to use strategies to help in your visual memory, your overall processing and working will be way much slower.
Ma'am, like even birthdays jab hota hai, to we play a game of memory. There are many things we keep in a tray.
Yes.
We show it for 30 seconds or something, and the one who writes the maximum, जो सबसे ज़्यादा लिखता है चीज़ों के नाम, वो जीत जाता है.
तो वो आपकी रैंडम मेमोरी हुई ना, क्योंकि उसमें कोई एसोसिएशन नहीं था, कोई सीक्वेंस नहीं है, राइट?
And ma'am, like even in case जहाँ पे हम बच्चों को छोटे छोटे फ्लैश कार्ड्स दे देते हैं, like puzzles type दे देते हैं, and they have to arrange it into the order. पहले एक स्टोरी सुनाई, फिर उसके बाद उनको अरेंजमेंट करना. तो दिस इज ऑल अबाउट इन दी.
Yes, this is where your visual memory comes into play.
Okay. तो अभी तक we were talking about the different types of the visual perception. हमने बात की थी figure ground perception की, जिसमें हमने देखा था कि कैसे एक जो बैकग्राउंड है और एक उसके ऊपर जो ऑब्जेक्ट है, उस दोनों को डिस्क्रिमिनेट करने में प्रॉब्लम कैसे आती है, क्या क्या चीज़ें जो प्रॉब्लम्स में आती हैं वो इफेक्ट करती हैं एक स्कूल लाइफ में, एक स्कूल के काम में इफेक्ट करती हैं। फिर हमने बात की थी फॉर्म कॉन्स्टेंसी की, कि अगर कोई चीज़ कहीं पढ़ाई गई है या कोई चीज़ कहीं देखी है तो फिर से अगर वही चीज़ किसी और जगह पे देखी जाए तो बच्चा उसको वैसे ही परसीव करता है जैसे सिखाई गई थी। फिर हमने बात की थी विजुअल डिस्क्रिमिनेशन की, जिसमें हमने देखा था कि कैसे वो दो सिमिलर चीज़ें जो दिखती हैं बट वो डिफरेंट होती हैं, उनको वो कैसे अलग अलग कर सकता है। जैसे मैम ने एक एग्जांपल दिया था कि द एंड दे, वो ऑलमोस्ट सेम दिखते हैं बट बोथ ऑफ देम मीन द डिफरेंट थिंग्स। फिर हमने बात की थी विजुअल क्लोजर की, कि कैसे एक कोई भी किसी भी बॉडी का पार्ट या फिर किसी भी ऑब्जेक्ट का अगर छोटा सा पार्ट दिखाया जाए तो कैसे उस छोटे से पार्ट से वो पूरा ऑब्जेक्ट बता सकता है कि ये क्या चीज़ है। फिर हमने बात की थी पोजीशन इन स्पेस की, जिसमें हमने देखा था लेफ्ट एंड राइट, अबव, बिलो, इन सब चीज़ों का कॉन्सेप्ट होना चाहिए इस बच्चे को। फिर हमने बात की थी स्पेशल रिलेशनशिप की, जिसमें हमने देखा था कि कैसे एक अपनी बॉडी का जो ओरिएंटेशन हम करते हैं कि हम कहाँ खड़े, वो विद रिस्पेक्ट टू द अदर थिंग्स जो हमारे आसपास हैं, उसकी कैसे वो उस रिलेशनशिप में है, कैसे आगे है, पीछे है, राइट में है, लेफ्ट में है, उस ऑब्जेक्ट का। फिर हमने बात की थी विजुअल मेमोरी की, जिसमें हमने बात की थी कि सीक्वेंसिंग, एक बच्चे को कैसे ऑर्डर में लगाना आना चाहिए, कैसे उसको रिटेन करना चाहिए। सो अभी तक हमने इन बातों पे बात की है। विल कंटिन्यू आवर डिस्कशन आफ्टर अ शॉर्ट ब्रेक।
The chief handicap of the blindness is not blindness, but the attitude of seeing people towards them. आइए जानने और समझने की कोशिश करते हैं कि बधिरांधता यानी डेफ ब्लाइंडनेस क्या है। बधिरांधता एक स्थिति है जिसमें दृष्टिहीनता एवं सुनने की शक्ति में कमी आती है तथा जिससे विचारों के आदान प्रदान और रोजमर्रा की आवश्यकताओं की पूर्ति में समस्या उत्पन्न होती है। बलराम एक 9 साल का बधिरांत बच्चा है। वो एक प्री मैच्योर बच्चा है जिसका शारीरिक विकास उसकी आयु के अनुरूप नहीं हुआ था। वो एक निम्न वर्गीय श्रेणी से संबंध रखता है तथा 5 साल से लगातार नेशनल एसोसिएशन फॉर ब्लाइंड दिल्ली के प्रशिक्षण कार्यक्रम से संलग्न है। इन 5 सालों के अंतर्गत उसे रोजमर्रा के कामों में, हलन चलन में, उसकी शैक्षणिक जरूरतों के अनुसार संप्रेषण द्वारा प्रशिक्षण दिया गया है, जिससे वो इन सब क्रियाओं में स्वावलंबी बन सके। बलराम बिना किसी सहायता के चाकू से फलों को काट सकता है। उनके छिलकों को कूड़ेदान में डाल सकता है। अपने बर्तनों को खुद साफ कर सकता है। उन्हें सही जगह पर रख सकता है। सही बर्तनों का चयन करके खुद खाना खाता है। एवं पानी की बोतल निकालकर पानी भी पीता है। इन सभी क्रियाओं में वो टेक्चुअल साइन लैंग्वेज से निर्देशों को ग्रहण करता है और अपने भावों को व्यक्त करता है। टेलर फ्रेम और ब्रेलर द्वारा गणित, पठन लेखन में भी प्रशिक्षण प्राप्त कर रहा है। सभी बच्चों की तरह उसका भी एक मनपसंद खेल है। उसे सेल फोन को अपने कानों पर लगाकर उसका कंपन महसूस करना अच्छा लगता है। कहा जाता है, वॉकिंग विद अ फ्रेंड इन डार्क इज बेटर देन वॉकिंग अलोन इन लाइट। कहने का तात्पर्य है कि वो लॉन्ग केन ट्रेवल, टैक्टाइल पाथ, ट्रेलिंग और लैंडमार्क्स द्वारा हलन चलन में भी सक्षम है और व्यायाम संबंधी क्रियाएं जैसे ट्रेडमिल, स्टैटिक साइकिल का स्वचालन भी कर सकता है। कहा गया है, द बेस्ट एंड मोस्ट ब्यूटीफुल थिंग्स इन द वर्ल्ड कैन नॉट बी सीन और इवन टच्ड, दे मस्ट बी फेल्ट विद द हार्ट।
वेलकम बैक आफ्टर द ब्रेक। ब्रेक पे जाने से पहले हम बात कर रहे थे विजुअल परसेप्शन की, कैसे एक असेसमेंट के एरिया में क्या क्या चीज़ें हमें ध्यान में रखनी चाहिए जब हम एक विजुअली एक देखने की क्षमता की फील्ड में हम जांच कर रहे होते हैं। अब हम बात करेंगे हमारे ऑडिटरी परसेप्शन के बारे में। मैम,
Okay, before we learn about how to go about doing auditory perception, I would like to say something that while we are administrating auditory items, it is very important to keep in mind that there should not be any visual material presented to the child. So then nothing in writing has to be given. The child has to listen to do the task, and he may be given a response sheet to record his responses for the assessor to tally later. The reason why no visual input should be presented is that a lot of children are strong visual learners, remembering words as a visual image but unable to identify sound units in words. This may later become a limitation while they have to learn new words, as they do not have the required skills to decode sounds in a word. In auditory perception, as I've just said, it's very important. Here we are trying to check for auditory perception. That means what we are listening to. And as I said, there are a lot of children who are very strong visual learners. All of us are different kind of learners. There are some of us who are mostly visual. We have to see something to remember it. Some of us have to hear something. Some of us have to do hearing and listening, both seeing both together. Yes, so we are a mixture of learners, but strongly one kind of learner. But if you are to check for auditory perception, it is very important that no visual material is presented, because you are trying to check for auditory area perception. Because if you present something in written to them, or you give them some visual in front, what happens, you will never find out, because children use their own strategies to read a spelling. You see, they will remember it as a picture and visually are able to recognize and tell you. But if you were to ask the same spelling by saying only the sounds of it, they will be unable to tell you, okay, for example, if you have written cat, they can see C-A-T, they know it as C-A-T, and they can say cat. But the same thing if you were to say, can you tell me what word you will get if you say ka, a, ta? They will be fox. They will not know what it is. They say they don't know, but they can read that word cat. So there's a difference between that. Something they've seen it visually, and here auditorily they have to understand what it is. Alright. So here we will not have any pictures. It's more to do with sounds. So I will give you various examples as to how to go about testing auditory perception. Just like we had in visual figure ground, similarly we have a auditory figure ground. It is the ability to pick out or focus on a particular sound against the background of other sounds. For example, you have picking out the bird calls among other forest sounds. So in a forest you hear a lot of sounds, but here we will tell you that you have to only pick out the bird calls that you can hear. Names of the main characters in a listening comprehension. In a listening comprehension, the child is listening and they are asked who are the main characters, who are the people we are talking about. Picking out words starting with a particular sound, like all the T sounds from a list of words. Supposing you are telling the child that you will be giving them a list of words, they have to hear. Each time he hears the T sound, he can either clap or he can put a cross on a piece of paper so that you know how many times he has heard it. Say supposing you will read like this: truck, umbrella, mother, time, lollipop, computer, tiger, torch. So every time he's heard a word starting with the T sound, he will have to either clap for you maybe, or maybe he puts a cross like that. Okay, so here the main area that we are testing is auditory figure ground. Just like in visual figure ground, you had to focus on a particular object or a particular picture or a particular symbol against the background of other things. Similarly over here in auditory figure ground, you are expected to focus on one particular sound. There are a lot of sounds around you. Like for very easy example is when a child is sitting in a classroom. Sometimes in a noisy school, what happens? There might be the next door class is making a lot of noise and the teacher is talking, but the child has to know that he has to focus on his teacher's whatever his teacher is saying, instead of being distracted by other sounds. So sometimes the other sounds become a bigger distraction, and that's his figure. The background noise becomes a figure rather than the teacher over here. Okay, so it is important to see whether they are able to focus, because a lot of information comes into our auditory channels also, and we have to know what to figure on. Say like in a lot of schools now they've introduced listening comprehension, where they're reading, the child has to remember certain things. So again, that is a figure ground exercise, because maybe after reading that comprehension out, when he is expected to listen, the teacher will ask him, okay, who are we talking about, whose birthday was it? Supposing it was a birthday about a child called Rahul, whose birthday was it? He's heard Rahul's name many times, that is his figure ground ability, so he said it was Rahul's birthday. Where did the birthday happen? He must have heard the name McDonald's, so he knows what to focus on. So he'll be able to say, ma'am, the birthday took place at McDonald's. What was the best gift he got? So if he was paying attention to best gift, he would have focused on remembering that information. Also the ability to pick out sounds, like when we are reading something, and when we are teaching a child in the beginning to understand the difference between but, all the consonant sounds, you should be able to understand the difference in them, so then only you can focus on something, right? So that is auditory figure ground. Yeah. The next area we're going to be seeing is auditory discrimination. Just like you have a visual discrimination, this is auditory discrimination. Again, it is the ability to distinguish between sounds of various frequencies, duration and intensity. For example, understanding difference between rhyming words. If I tell you rhyming words like tan, fan, can, tap, which one is the odd one here? Here the odd word is tap, because it does not rhyme with the rest. Yes, so you're able to distinguish between the two of the other sounds and the one which is different, the odd one out. Then distinguish between a short and long vowel sound. If you are aware, a short sound of a vowel is, like for A, it is A. A long sound is when a vowel says its own name, like A is saying A. So over here, if I ask you to understand which is the one which has the long vowel sound. So I am saying lap, man, rain, jam. So the others had a short vowel sound like lap and man and jam says A. The sound is A, and in rain, the sound of A is A. AI says A over here. So then understanding the difference between the short and long vowel sound. Just like in Hindi also we have K, K, G, K. So it's a difference in the frequency, in the way we say it, or the intensity. Again, to test it, you can have differences between similar sounding words. Sa and sh. So maybe you count the number of sa and sh sounds words you hear. So a child will be read out a list, and you will give him sa and sh sounds to tick. Each time he hears sa, he can put a tick under S. Each time he hears a sh sound, he can put a tick under sh. Simple, shame, silly, shape, sister, second, sandwich, shop, shelter. So here what you are expecting the child to do is to be able to discriminate. There are many sounds which sound same but they are not the same. So the ability, you have that perceptual ability to understand that though they're sounding same, there is a slight amount of difference, and it's just a difference in the way we say it. For example, as I said, in Hindi we say ka, kha. So you say kavita and you say khargosh. There's just a slight difference between ka and kha, but you have to be able to distinguish that, right? Just like in sa and sh, it sounds almost similar, but then if you are unable to make a difference out when you are writing that spelling, if you say the word, say supposing you said ship and the child has written sip, S-I-P, that means he has not been able to distinguish between sh and sa sound. One of the earliest indications of children who might be at risk at having dyslexia is disability to understand rhyming sounds, because again in rhyming sounds you have to distinguish what is different. So when I said tap, when I said can, ran and man and tap, so immediately you are able to hear one sound is different. So when you are saying rhymes, nursery rhymes also, when you say Jack and Jill went up the hill, agar if you can't remember Jill and hill means you can't distinguish between rhyming sounds, you will not be able to pick up rhymes very quickly. So that's an early indication of a child being at risk for dyslexia.
मैम इसमें ऐसा हो सकता है कि जो बच्चा जैसे जिसको ऑडिटरी डिस्क्रिमिनेशन की प्रॉब्लम हो, जो नहीं कर पाता है डिस्क्रिमिनेट, तो उस केस में मैम जो भी उसको ज्यादा फेवरेबल होता है वो उस चीज को ही सुनता है, ऐसा कुछ होता है क्या मैम?
हाँ, इसीलिए क्या होता है कि जब उन्हें कोई ऐसे, जैसे मैंने बताया कि एक स्पेलिंग में वो सुनते गलत है और लिखते गलत है, आपकी सुनने में अगर आपको प्रॉब्लम आ गई है तो फिर आप लिखोगे गलत, तो इन ऐसे बच्चों को हमें विजुअली समझाना पड़ेगा कि ये स्पेलिंग ऐसे है. So you can't expect them because that cannot be remedied. You see?
I'm like एक केस जैसे था मैम, तो उसके मदर ने ही बोला था whenever if they were घर पे एक टाइम था जब गाने बज रहे थे पीछे म्यूजिक सिस्टम पे, and that time the child did something wrong, तो उसकी मदर ने उसको she was scolding her, तो उस केस पे वो बच्चा अपनी मदर की डांट रही थी जो वो चीज ना सुन के he was still listening to that song, और ही वॉज द वन जिसको प्रॉब्लम थी, जिसको ऑडिटरी जो साउंड्स होते हैं उसको डिस्क्रिमिनेट करने में प्रॉब्लम होती थी. हम ऐसा कुछ है कि जो भी फेवरेट होता है वो उसको ज्यादा फेवर करते हैं?
हाँ, वो द एग्जाम्पल यू गेव दैट इज मोर ऑफ अ फिगर ग्राउंड प्रॉब्लम. जैसे उसकी माँ डांट रही है, ही शुड बी कॉन्सेंट्रेटिंग ऑन दैट, बट उसका ध्यान है ऑन द म्यूजिक, बिकॉज वो वहाँ उसका फोकस ज्यादा है इंस्टेड ऑफ लिसनिंग टू व्हाट इज मदर. जैसे मैंने कहा कि आप क्लासरूम में आप टीचर की बात नहीं सुन रहे हो, आसपास में क्या हो रहा है, आपके पार्टनर आपको कुछ बोल रहा है कि सुनो कल क्या किया, आप उस पर ज्यादा ध्यान दे रहे हो, सो यू डोंट नो, यू कांट फोकस, यू कांट चूज वेयर यू हैव टू फोकस ऑन, राइट. और डिस्क्रिमिनेशन है जैसे साउंड्स में, जैसे हिंदी में स्पेशली आपके ट ठ ध द, तो अगर आप एंड साउंड आप डिस्क्रिमिनेट नहीं कर पाए कि ये अलग है, आप लिखते वक्त भी गलत करोगे. काफी बच्चों को ये प्रॉब्लम है. दिस इज वेरी वेरी कॉमन.
जैसे छोटे बच्चे होते हैं, अगर उधर कहीं हम छुप जाते हैं, हम कोई आवाज लगाते हैं उस बच्चे को, तो वो पहचान लेता है कि पापा है कि मम्मा है, तो ये चीजें आती हैं उसके अंदर.
वो पहचाना, वो तो क्लोजर हो गया ना कि आपने सुन के फिर पता क्या किया, ये कौन बोल रहा है कि नहीं. ओके, सो द नेक्स्ट एरिया इज ऑडिटरी ब्लेंडिंग. इन ऑडिटरी ब्लेंडिंग वी आर गोइंग टू बी लुकिंग एट the ability to blend or combine together units of sounds to form a single sound. So blending or putting together, so combining, that is what, small units of sound to form one single sound. For example, when we join together the sound k, a, t, you have to blend it together and then you get cat. Similarly, kl or k, put together they will give you clock. For bigger words, we can join together like two words to make one compound word. Supposing I say milk, man, milkman, airport, airport. So we are joining two parts of two. One word is broken into two parts. We are joining them together to make one word. Then joining the sound h, arm. What do you get? You get harm. So there are various combinations of how we can combine either sound units in one word into various small sounds, or we are looking at how we break one part of a word and then join them together. So here we are looking at auditory blending. In auditory blending, what we are doing, we are given sound units, little parts of words, and we have to blend them together so that we can make one final sound. So we start with something larger, which is easier for children to do, like we play with compound words, so we tell the children, now I'm going to give you 2 words, I want you to make it 1 word. If they are able to do it, means they are able to blend 2 sounds. So as I gave you an example, if I say milk man, join them together, it makes milkman. So popcorn. It might seem very simple, but children who have this problem, they will not be able to make two words into 1 word. If they are able to do this, when you move into spelling, that is when you are teaching spelling to a child, we want them to learn by sound. So in a simple word like say cat is made up of what? K, A, T. So when I tell you when I say that K, A, T, you say cat. Similarly, if I tell you kl or k, claw. If I say, okay, now I want you to join the sound h plus arm. If I want you to join the word, say speed. Yes. Seed. Yes. So you are able to blend. Unless you are able to do this, you won't be able to spell independently. So blending is a very important skill required for spelling, because without that we will not be able to spell. We can't move on further, because how many things can you learn visually? You have to be able to understand sounds, to manipulate them, to be able to write them. Yes. The next area we are going to be looking at is auditory analysis. Auditory analysis is the ability to break down a word in its individual sound units. That means earlier we were blending, now we have to break down the sound. You are given the whole sound, you have to break it down into individual units. This is what helps us to spell when we hear a word. If we can analyze the word in its phonic units, only then we can write the spelling. Example, how many sounds can you hear in the word drum? In the word drum, the sounds that we can hear are dr, m. So if we can find out that it is spelled with dr or m, only then I can write drum. Say the word found. Now say it again, removing f and putting r. What do you get? So from found, if you remove f and you add r, you're going to get down. So you can analyze that, you can remove one sound and then you add one sound. Yes, so that is called auditory analysis. As I was telling you, just the skill earlier was blending. In blending is what happening, and you're given different sounds and then you're putting them together. Here you're given the whole sound and you're expected to break it down into sound units so that you're able to spell it. This is the next level, because the blending is I am giving you the sounds and you're putting it together. But here you're given the full sound and you have to break it down to know what is how many sounds are there to write it. So if you're not able to do this, what happens, like if you're a visual learner and you have learned up many spellings, a lot of parents come and tell us that he has no problem in spelling. In his spelling dictation he gets 10 on 10. But then we have to tell them that he's getting 10 on 10 because he learned the spelling visually. He's learned them as a whole word. But if you are to give him a list of words which he has not learned, there what he has to do, every time there's no visual memory of that in his memory storage. So there he'll have to listen to a word and write it. Each time we are listening to a new word, what are we doing? We are employing this auditory analysis perception. That means I hear a new word, say supposing I have to write a word in Hindi like Kamal. To write Kamal, you have to know that Kamal is made up of Ka, Ma, La. If I can't understand that, I will not know how many sounds I have to write down in Kamal. Like then it is playing around with sounds, because when we are reading, we are constantly using what we call decoding. Decoding is when you can understand sound structure. For example, I gave you one sound where I said I'm saying found. You say found, but now take away F and you put R, so it became round. So sometimes you know the base word, like you know the base sound. Supposing and. When the child learns the sound and, what happens? Each time he sees and he sees a her sound in front. So he knows this is hand. Take away her and put sir. He knows it's sand, right? You are able to analyze those different parts of the sound. If you are able to do this slowly, you can become an independent speller. Otherwise, you will be constantly working only on your visual memory, which can become very difficult. As they say in the English language, there are over 1 million words. how many can you put into your memory, but there are 44 sounds. It's easier to learn through sounds and then move in to help you to spell.
So like this will go with the blending also.
Yes, first you have to be able to blend, because see, when you're teaching a child, you have to teach how blending happens, that I am putting together to make something. Only when you have made that, then you can teach the next level ki, okay, now take out the parts, right? So then this follows after you can do blending. If a child cannot blend, he obviously cannot go into breaking up a sound. Okay.
तो जैसे कुछ पार्ट तो याद करवा दिए, कुछ स्पेलिंग्स याद करवा दिए, बट जो नए नए वर्ड्स आए हैं उनको लिखने में ऑडिटरी एनालिसिस जरूरी होता है।
हाँ, वो एक स्ट्रैटेजी है। अगर आपको ऑडिटरी एनालिसिस नहीं आती, आप हर एक बार जो एक नया वर्ड सुनोगे, आपको पता ही नहीं चलेगा कि हमें लिखना कैसे है, क्योंकि आपके पास कोई विजुअल मेमोरी में कोई स्टोरेज नहीं है कि आपको ये वर्ड लिखना आता है। तो आपको साउंड सुन के पता होना है कि ये साउंड मुझे सुनाई दे रहा है, जो फोनिक एलिमेंट है। जैसे फोनिक्स वी नो इज द साउंड सिस्टम ऑफ एनी लैंग्वेज। यस, इफ हर एक लैंग्वेज का, जैसे हिंदी का आपके वर्णमाला है पूरा, वैसे ही इंग्लिश में भी वावल साउंड्स है, कॉन्सोनेंट साउंड्स है। द फोनिक सिस्टम ऑफ एनी लैंग्वेज हेल्प्स अस टू पुट इन टुगेदर, स्पेल एंड spell a word or work on a word, read a word, right? So the phonic elements of a word are used in blending and as well as in analysis.
Okay.
The next area we are going to be looking at is auditory closure. Just like we had visual closure where we are seeing a part of something and we know what the whole is, similarly over here, auditory closure is the ability to hear part of a word or a rhyme or a song and say the whole. It is very useful in giving verbal prompts to children to help recall something that they have learnt. For example, when we say that, like if they can't remember an answer and you say it starts with per or it starts with her, so you're giving a verbal prompt, like they have to close whatever they have learned. Another example of checking for it is like you can ask the child, how many words can you make with the beginning sound blur? So the child is expected to come up with responses like black, block, blot, blink. Similarly, you can ask the child, how many words can you make with the ending sound and? So they can come up with hand, sand, stand, land, grand, bland and so forth. Okay, so here you are giving a part of the sound, whether it is a part of a word or whether it is a part of a rhyme or whether it is part of a song. Say for example, rhyme. A lot of times we prompt children, we say Jack and Jill and they are supposed to say went up the hill, right? And in a song, like when you are playing Antakshari, what happens? You hear part of a song and then immediately that gives you a prompt to know what the rest of the sound is. A lot of times when I say it helps give children prompts, like when they have learnt an answer and they can't remember, and we say प से शुरू होता है, we say ट से शुरू होता है, and then it gives them a clue ki okay, yeah, okay, which is the animal, which is the national animal. They can't remember. You say ट से शुरू है, immediately they say tiger. So that is auditory closure. So again, auditory closure is you hear part of something and you know what the rest of the word or the sound or the rhyme or the song is. Okay.
Okay. So मैम लाइक जैसे हम लोग कभी बड़ी क्लासेस में आते हैं, आंसर्स याद करते हैं एकदम, जैसे उसको मग अप हम कर लेते हैं, तो कोई सुनता है उस आंसर को, मम्मी को बोलते हैं आप आंसर सुन लो, स्टार्टिंग का याद नहीं होता, वो थोड़ा सा हिंट देती है तो बाकी का आंसर हम पूरा दे देते हैं।
तो आप क्या कर रहे हो वहाँ पे? दैट इज योर
विजुअल क्लोजर,
ऑडिटरी क्लोजर, क्योंकि आप सुन रहे हो, आपको तब आपके सामने आंसर तो नहीं है ना, आप सुन के बता रहे हो, राइट?
सो टिल नाउ वी वर टॉकिंग अबाउट द ऑडिटरी परसेप्शन, जिसमें हमने बात की थी सबसे पहले ऑडिटरी फिगर ग्राउंड की। जैसे विजुअल फिगर ग्राउंड की हमने बात की थी कि वो डिस्क्रिमिनेट कर पाता है दो, जैसे बैकग्राउंड में और जो मेन है। तो इसमें हमने देखा था कि जिस चीज में भी उसको फोकस करना है, फ्रॉम द बैकग्राउंड साउंड्स टू द साउंड जिसको उसको फोकस करना है, वो उसमें डिस्क्रिमिनेट कर पाएगा। फिर हमने बात की थी ऑडिटरी डिस्क्रिमिनेशन की, दो या दो से ज्यादा डिफरेंट साउंड्स में वो डिस्क्रिमिनेट कर पाएगा कि ये साउंड इस चीज की है या ये साउंड इस चीज की है। देन हमने बात की थी ऑडिटरी ब्लेंडिंग की। इसमें हमने बात की थी ब्लेंडिंग, दैट इज मिक्सिंग देम और पुटिंग देम टुगेदर। इसमें जैसे हमने दो वर्ड्स लिए, जैसे हमने सन लिया एंड फ्लावर लिया, तो उन दोनों को एक साथ ब्लेंड करके एक साथ उनको जोड़ के हमने बना दिया सनफ्लावर। तो ये चीज हमने देखी थी ऑडिटरी ब्लेंडिंग में। फिर हमने बात की थी ऑडिटरी एनालिसिस की। उसको हमने देखा था, उसमें हम ब्रेक डाउन करते हैं, उसको टुकड़ों में बांट देते हैं, एक जैसे कोई वर्ड होता है। अगर हम बात कर रहे हैं ब्रूम की, तो ब्रूम में हम देखते हैं ब रू उ म, डिफरेंट उसको ब्रेक डाउन करने में कैसे हम करते हैं, उसको हम बोलते हैं ऑडिटरी एनालिसिस। फिर हमने बात की थी ऑडिटरी क्लोजर की, जिसमें कि हमें अगर थोड़ा सा भी हिंट दे दिया जाता है या थोड़ा सा बता दिया जाता है जो स्टार्टिंग में है या थोड़ा सा एंड में है, तो उससे बच्चा जो है उस वर्ड को या उस चीज को कंप्लीट कर पाता है, क्लोज कर पाता है सुन के। तो अभी तक हमने बात की थी ऑडिटरी परसेप्शन की। वील कंटिन्यू आवर डिस्कशन आफ्टर अ शॉर्ट ब्रेक।
ऑटिज्म एक व्यापक विकासात्मक विकलांगता है जिसके लक्षण जीवन के प्रथम 3 वर्ष में ही दिखाई पड़ते हैं, जैसे असंगत खेल, असमान स्थूल एवं सूक्ष्म गामक क्रियाएं, शाब्दिक संकेतों पर अभिव्यक्ति न देना।
Where is the cup? देखो, open your eyes, open करो, open करके, open.
नियमित कार्यक्रम परिवर्तन का विरोध करना एवं अवलोकनीय शारीरिक उच्च स्तरीय या निम्न स्तरीय क्रियाकलाप। UNCRPD 2007 सेक्शन 1 ऑफ आर्टिकल 4 निशक्तता के क्षेत्र में कार्यरत प्रोफेशनल के प्रशिक्षण पर महत्व देता है। ऑटिज्म के क्षेत्र में सरकारी एवं गैर सरकारी संस्थाएं कार्यरत हैं, जो भारतीय पुनर्वास परिषद द्वारा पंजीकृत हैं। सोसाइटी फॉर एडवांस स्टडी इन रिहैबिलिटेशन एक ऐसी ही गैर सरकारी संस्था है। कनिष्क 13 साल का एक ऑटिस्टिक बच्चा है जो इसी संस्था से प्रशिक्षण प्राप्त कर रहा है। असंगत क्रियाएं, कार्यकलापों में निरस्ता, असमान स्थूल एवं सूक्ष्म गामक क्रियाएं जैसे बॉडी रॉकिंग और फिंगर रिगलिंग उसमें देखी जा सकती है। उसे मैचिंग और पेस्टिंग, पॉइंटिंग जैसी क्रियाएं सिखाई जाती हैं।
Very good. Glass. Where is the glass? Glass. Very good. कप को टच करो जल्दी से। कप को। Where is the cup? Very good. कप में क्या करता है कनिष्क? टी पीता है। चलो ग्लास। Where is the glass? Very good. चलो बाउल की तरह, बाउल जल्दी से टच करो बाउल को। Very good. बाउल में क्या करता है कनिष्क?
तथा साथ ही साथ रोजमर्रा की आवश्यकताएं जैसे खाना, पीना, कपड़े पहनना, और व्यायाम संबंधी प्रशिक्षण दिया जाता है। ऑटिस्टिक बच्चों को भिन्न भिन्न प्रकार की कार्यविधियां उनके स्तर के अनुसार सिखाई जाती हैं, जैसे कुछ बच्चों के लिए कलरिंग विद इन वन एरिया, मैचिंग एंड आइडेंटिफिकेशन, फाइन मोटर स्किल्स, आई हैंड कोऑर्डिनेशन, कंसेप्ट ऑफ वेजिटेबल्स, फ्रूट्स, बॉडी पार्ट्स, कलर्स पर जोर दिया जाता है तथा कुछ को प्रश्न पढ़ के उत्तर देने में और रोजमर्रा की आवश्यकताओं को पूरा करने में सक्षम बनाया जाता है। इसके अलावा राइम्स, डांसिंग, सिंगिंग द्वारा लेजर एंड रिक्रिएशनल एक्टिविटीज में भाग लेने के लिए प्रोत्साहित किया जाता है। इन सभी कार्यकलापों एवं प्रशिक्षण का एकमात्र उद्देश्य उन्हें स्वनिर्भर बनाना है, ताकि ये डगमगाते पांव सक्षम बन जीवन के एक एक पायदान पर दृढ़ता से आगे बढ़ें और अपनी मंजिल को पा ले। एक तारा टिमटिमाता, उसने आकाश को छू लिया। एक लौ जली कहीं, उसने अंधकार को मिटा दिया।
वेलकम बैक आफ्टर द ब्रेक। ब्रेक पे जाने से पहले हमने बात की थी ऑडिटरी परसेप्शन की, जिसमें हमने डिफरेंट सब एरियाज पे बात की थी कि कैसे कैसे वो असेसमेंट में हमारी हेल्प करते हैं, क्या क्या चीजें हमें ध्यान में रखनी चाहिए while assessing। मैम आगे क्या है हमारे साथ?
Like now the last area which we have, just like we had visual memory, similarly we also have auditory memory. Just like in visual memory we had sequential and non-sequential, here also in auditory memory we have the same. Basically auditory memory is the ability to recall information which has been presented verbally either in sequence or non-sequential, something that you have heard or you have to listen to either in sequence or non-sequencing. For example, in sequence, when we are saying the whole alphabet or the numbers in order like A, B, C, D, E, F, or like 1, 2, 3, 4, that is in order. You're hearing it sequentially, so you have to remember it in that order. Sometimes when we play memory games like I went to the market to buy fish, then the next person has to say I went to the market to buy fish, potatoes. Then the third person has to say I went to the market to buy fish, potatoes, tomatoes. So something like that. So you have to remember a sequence in which something has been bought. Listening to a story and remembering the sequence of events when retelling it. So when you listen to a story, when you're retelling it, you can't say what happened in the end first. You have to first say what happened in the beginning. So remembering a sequence of something you have heard. Then we can also test it through digit span. In digit span is where you listen to certain number of numbers in after a certain short break of say 1 second. Like you tell the child you want to listen to these numbers and you repeat in reverse sequence. That means you have to say it from backward. So the numbers you're going to say is at 2, 5, 7. And the child will have to tell you the numbers at 7, 5, 2 in reverse order. That means from back to the front. So there's just to be a pause of a second in between telling him the numbers. So you can start with 3 numbers, move on to 4, then move on to 5 according to the ability of the child. So digit span is to see how many digits the child can remember within a given time frame. Then to test auditory non-sequential memory, again over here it is random memory that you're trying to check. So a child can be, you can give various things. You can read out a list of items. For example, you will tell the child that I'm going on a holiday to the beach, so I pack the following items: a swimsuit, a pair of rubber slippers, my sunglasses, sunscreen, 3 t-shirts and shorts. So after some time you will ask the child, can you tell me what are the things I packed? So he can tell it to you in any random order. He can say sunscreen first, then he can say rubber slippers. Whatever he remembers he will tell you, but here there is no sequence of remembering it and telling you back. Or the child, so here we are expecting the child to remember as many items as possible in any random order. So as you can see that in auditory memory, just like in visual memory, there's some things we have to remember in a sequence. We can't jump the sequence. It has to be ordered, one thing following the other. Similarly, in auditory sequential memory, there's certain things like, for example, A, B, C, D. So the moment the child says A, B, D, E, we know that it's not following a sequence. Yes, so hearing something in a sequence and saying it in a sequence. So when I'm telling a child a story and then I expect the child to tell me back the story. Like if he said, like I say, Goldilocks went to the wood and into the 3 bears' house, and the first she sat on Papa Bear's chair and then she ate his porridge, it was too hot. So that whole story, the fun of it is remember it in sequence. She can't say that, in the end the bears came and saw her sleeping on the bed. So remembering that sequence is your auditory memory which is coming into place because you are listening to the story. There is no visual pictures in front to help you guide over there, right? And then when we play these games, like we say we went to the market, this is all auditory sequential memory building games. Like the child has to keep remembering the sequence as you are adding on more and more items. Here the stress over here is remembering things in a sequence. Similarly, just like we had in visual random memory, which was non-sequential, things which are not associated, things which are not in a sequence. So like I gave you an example where I said that you're packing to go on a beach holiday. So now what are these are the things you're taking. So when you're asking a child to recall or recollect or remember whatever you have read out to him, the list, they can remember in any random order. So they are trying to see how many things they can read. Here you are seeing what are the memory strategies that they're using to remember something which doesn't follow any sequence, so they can remember in any random order.
So मैम जैसे हम लोग पहले जब छोटे होते हैं या फिर जब हम ऐसे बच्चों के साथ डील कर रहे होते हैं तो जनरली these kind of areas can be developed more with the games.
Yes.
More with the activities because
You can set it to music, like like ABCD. आप सबसे पहले कैसे सिखाते हो? वो गाने में सिखाते हो ना कि ABCD, तभी बच्चों को याद रहता है, क्योंकि एक सीक्वेंस में उसमें एक रिदम होती है. वो रिदम कहीं टूटता है तो बच्चे को भी समझ आता है कि मैंने कहीं गलत बोला है ना. वो आके LMNOP ऐसे गाते गाते सुनाते तो they remember that sequence. So as you said, it's an interesting way. That's one of the strategies to help build on sequential memory. Set it to a jingle. Set it to, इसलिए हमें rhymes ज़्यादा अच्छे लगते हैं. हम टीवी पे कोई ad देखते हैं तो कोई गाना हमें अच्छा लगता है तो कभी कभी पेरेंट्स बोलते हैं कि इसे वैसे तो कुछ याद नहीं है पर टीवी के जिंगल जो है वो बहुत पकड़ लेता. कैसे पकड़ लेता? क्योंकि उसमें एक सीक्वेंस है, एक रिदम है, तो बच्चे को पूरी गाने कैसे याद हो जाते हैं और पढ़ाई का कुछ याद नहीं होता. तो वी हैव टू थिंक of ways to start, those are strategies to make them remember.
Okay. So मैम like हमने विजुअल की बात कर ली, हमने ऑडिटरी की बात कर ली, अब मैम नेक्स्ट कौन सा एरिया है?
हम अभी लैंग्वेज के बारे में बात करेंगे. लैंग्वेज एरियाज which we have to test because that is also part of the overall academics. Again, language has its divisions, as in some language areas which are expression and some which are receptive. So we'll be looking at them now. Language assessment. Now the areas that are to be assessed in language are, as I was just telling you, we have receptive language and we have expressive language. Receptive language is things which come through our input. Yes. For example, listening. So here we are receiving. When we are listening, we are passive, in the sense we are just listening to something. And then reading. Reading is, again, you have something in front of you, you are just reading that. There is no self-expression over here, either in listening or reading. So this is called receptive language. Similarly, we have expressive language, where it's an output. Yes, where orally when you are saying something or expressing yourself orally, that is coming from within. So it's expressive language or output. And similarly, when you are expected to write in written expression, again it's an output form within. So these are output areas and receptive language are input areas. So as you can see, in language there are two basic areas. One is receptive, wherein we are receiving. So when I am listening to something, I have nothing to contribute, I am just taking in whatever is being said to me, that is input. And similarly, when reading, the material is already given to me. When I am reading it, again that input is going into me. So these are receptive. This is the first basic. This is the first basic. Only if I am good in this, then will come in the expressive areas. Expressive areas is my self-expression, whether it is orally, when I am saying things orally, or in written expression when I am writing, and it's an output. Only output can only follow input. If there is no input, is not right, obviously your output will be affected. So we are trying to look at both these areas when we are assessing for language. How we go about assessing it? Yeah, I am giving you some examples. Some of the receptive language activities you can do to test is one of the examples for listening is listening comprehension. In listening comprehension, you read out a passage, a small paragraph, and then you can ask the child questions about what happened, who is it about, where did it happen, when did it happen. So here the child is expected to listen and comprehend. So there is input over here. Similarly, you can have an activity maybe where it is listening and following directions activities. There's a game which we play with children called Simon Says. In Simon Says, you say Simon says, put up your left hand. Simon says, run 2 steps in front. So all that he's doing is he's just listening to you. How do you know he's listening and listening? When he's following, when he's carrying out the direction properly. So you can make anything else. Like for example, you can ask the child that I'm going to tell you some steps to make a glass of nimbu pani for me. So to make a glass of nimbu pani, you will give instructions and he has to follow. That can also be a listening activity. Then you have reading comprehension. Reading comprehension to test reading areas wherein the child is expected to read a paragraph according to his level, and then there are some questions over here. Now what is important to remember here, that the questioning has to be varied. Varied means you can't just ask simple question answers, what happened here, who had it, where only the child has to write. It has to be with MCQs. MCQs is multiple choice questions, where you have asked a question and you have given many choices for the answer, because here we are trying to test for comprehension, whether the child has read something and understand it, has understood it. Similarly for word meaning, like they've read a new word, are they able to understand the meaning of the word? It could be a fill in the blanks, wherein one sentence from the paragraph is picked up, one blank is left, and he has to fill it up. So for both listening and for reading, a lot of activities can be done instead of just listening to something. It can be a doing activity, it could be responses can be different. Responses can be different. So like in listening activities, it needn't be only paper pencil task. As I said, you can even get the child to make a glass of lemonade. What he has to do is he has to listen and comprehend and carry out the instructions. Similarly for reading comprehension, over here we are not checking to see whether the child can write a full answer. We are checking to see whether he can identify, recognize an answer. So you can give the answer, like I said, in a multiple choice question, where he has to choose the right answer. He doesn't have to write it. So we are looking at comprehension, not the ability whether he can write. That ability about whether he can express himself, whether he can write something, is what we are going to check in expressive language activities. So some of the things that we can do in expressive language activities are: for oral expression, where they only have to orally say something. Oral expressive skills are based on a picture, object, or a topic. So you can give a picture maybe of a park or a classroom or a festival, and then you ask questions regarding it. Like which festival is being celebrated, what are the two children doing. You can ask questions around that picture. So you'll have to structure it from beforehand. Like asking what, when, where, to see the child's observation, the child's ability to express about what is happening over there. Or it can be object talk, what we call like the child brings say and tell. Like they bring their favorite toy to class. It might be their teddy bear or something like that, and then they say, this is my teddy bear, it is very soft, it is brown in color. So the ability to express, so that comes from within. They have to be able to, we are checking to see how much vocabulary they have, how much ideas they have, are they able to say full sentences. Those things are being checked through the oral activity. Or you can give them a topic, like you can say, can you tell me how you celebrated your last birthday. So the child, the ability to be able to say, okay, my last birthday was here, you check for details. Does he know the sequence of what happened? The cake was cut, the children sang for him, then they played games, and then he got presents. So you're checking for all these things when you're doing an oral expression. Similarly in written expression, these same things can be done, only the difference is here that the child is expected to write. Again, you can give a picture and then ask them to write about what is happening in the picture, or you can give a topic, and the topic has to be something which a child has experienced. You can't ask a topic like like what will you do if you go to the moon. A lot of children who have not gone to the moon will not be able to write that. So very simple everyday topics of writing about themselves, writing about their school, writing about their last birthday, things which they can express, because here we are trying to see, does he have ideas, is he able to write a sentence structurally, yes, and does he know how to sequence the things he is writing, what is to be written first, what is to be written in the end. Those are the things we are trying to assess through language assessment.
तो पहले हमने उसकी जो समझ रहा है उसकी क्षमता को बढ़ाया, फिर उसने जो समझा है उस चीज की हमने जो उसको कैसे वो बता रहा है, कैसे समझा रहा है, उस चीज को डेवलप करा है.
तो पहले जो समझना है वो आपका पहले होना चाहिए, उसी के बाद ही आप अपने से एक्सप्रेस कर सकते हो.
ओके मैम, नेक्स्ट कौन सा एरिया?
नेक्स्ट विल बी लुकिंग एट मैथ्स एरियाज, बिकॉज दैट इज अनदर इम्पोर्टेंट एकेडमिक एरिया. या so in maths assessment, we are talking about assessment at all levels, beginning from prep level towards higher levels. All right, so here we check for basic concepts at each level. First we look at pre-maths concept, where numbers are not being introduced, but you have to understand concepts of tall, short, big, small, more, less, before, after, in between, Then we move into numbers. So from numbers we have to understand the sense of place value, yes, which is one's house, tens house, hundreds house, yes. After we know place value, only then we can move into addition. So when we are giving addition, it can be simple addition, it can be like carryover addition. It has to move in graduation. Then we check for subtraction, multiplication, division, fractions and story sums. Now when we are doing a maths assessment over here, the areas we have just spoken about are the very basics. You will have to develop the assessment according to the level of the child you are testing. Say supposing it is a child in class 1, obviously he has not done division in class 1, you will not include division. What you have to check is, does he understand concept, pre-maths concept? Before even you understand what numbers are or how to work with numbers, you have to understand certain other concept like big and small. So then later on we can apply it to a number. Is number 9 big or is number 5 big? So understanding the bigness and smallness of numbers, you have to understand pre-maths concept कि big क्या होता है and what is small. Similarly, tall and short. Yes, because when we are trying to explain ascending order and descending order, we say we are going up or we are coming down. So unless they understand that concept, you cannot apply it in math. More or less, like when we are giving a story sum and we say how many more will you get, or how much less did it become. So you have to understand more means something is becoming increasing, and when you're saying less is you're taking away something. So unless you have this pre-maths concept, you cannot apply it in your everyday regular math. So those are the pre-maths concept. Then if it is a child in class 2, by that time in class 2 they would have done addition, they would have done subtraction and maybe a little bit of multiplication also. But it's important to remember that whenever you're doing any maths assessment, it has to progress from simple to the complex. So if you're giving addition, you have to give very simple addition like 1 plus 2, then slowly it can become 10 plus 2. Then you give an addition where there is a carryover, so you have to check at which level the child is not able to function. It could be that he can do 1 plus 2, he can do 10 plus 2, but when you give him 322 plus 40, maybe that is what he can't do. So your remediation or your intervention for the child starts at that level, that 3-digit numbers he cannot add or he cannot do carryover. So you have to know which area to start with. That is why your assessment has to start from, it has to be very graded, moving from the simple to the more complex one. So as and when, like in class 3 and 4, children do fractions, they do time, they do money, they do division. Seeing the current math syllabus or curriculum in the school is how you're going to base your maths assessment.
जैसे प्री मैथ्स में हम बोल सकते हैं कि वो एक बहुत बेसिक सा मैथ्स
बहुत बेसिक है. जैसे आप जब प्री स्कूल में जो करते हैं बच्चे, प्री स्कूल में आप दिखाते हैं ना कि ज़्यादा कहाँ है, कम कहाँ है, पुट ऑल दीज ब्लॉक्स फ्रॉम टॉल टू शॉर्ट. Why do we teach that? जब तक आप वो नहीं सिखाते हो, आप नंबर्स क्या है, नंबर्स आर जस्ट सिंबल्स, है ना, कि 7 लिखना एक सिंबल है, 9 एक सिंबल है. अब ये 7 माने 7 चीज़ें और 9 माने 9 चीज़ें. लाइक 9 balls means more than 7 balls. How will you explain that numberness? अगर आपने more or less नहीं सिखाया, अब तब ये नहीं सिखा सकते क्योंकि 7 is only a number, only a symbol representing it. So we have to check for these concepts, and I said you have to figure out which grade it is. Otherwise, what happens is you will not know which area there is a problem in. Yeah? Okay, then next thing that we are going to check is graphomotor skills. Graphomotor skills बोले तो your writing skills. Okay, the aim here is to check for handwriting, to see if the child has visual perception problems, memory or motor coordination problems. So in handwriting, problem areas can be either in your visual perception or in your memory or in your motor coordination problems. Now easy way of doing that is asking the child can be asked to write a sentence like, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. If they write a sentence like this, all the letters of the alphabet are taken care of from A to Z. If you see the sentence carefully, you can see that Q is also there, Z is also there, Y is also there. So if they're writing this, you can check for all the letter formations. So once you ask the child to write it in their best handwriting, then you ask them to write it in a normal handwriting like they write all the time, and then you can ask them to write it many times in a given time period. So here in graphomotor skills we are looking at handwriting. Graphomotor means writing or handwriting. All right. So to test that, as I said, you can give this sentence: the brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, wherein from A to Z the formation of all letters can be checked. 3 ways of doing that is: first, we expect you to ask the child to write in the best handwriting where there is no time pressure, so you can see whether he knows the letter formation. Next, you will ask them write it in your normal handwriting, so that you can see, you know, when he is writing quickly, how is he writing, are the letters properly formed. And then it becomes time, because you know, when you're in class, you have to do something according to a time activity. So you say in 3 minutes I want to see how many times you can write it. So under pressure, how he writes it. So you have to evaluate the handwriting very closely in that sense. Yeah.
Okay. So these are the different like we can take, like visual perception comes from the
Memory, spacing and all that.
All so much interrelated with each other, and they come in the graphomotor skills.
Because you have to remember how to make B, how to make C. If you don't remember, you won't know how to make it, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So which is the points that we need to take care of?
The points that we need to take care of when we are doing an informal assessment, though it is informal, there are some things we need to remember. So points to remember are that when you create the assessment, you have to keep in mind that the child may be functioning below his or her class level. That means the child may be in class 2, but he may be having a problem. That is why he has come to you for assessment. So maybe the assessment has to be at the level of class 1. Then the assessment may have to be conducted over 2-3 sessions, because each session can be 30 to 45 minutes each, to rule out fatigue. You can't have a very tired child doing the assessment for you, so try to assess all these areas in one day. Then forming a rapport with the child before you start for the best performance, because you want the child to perform at his best level, so you have to form a rapport to help him cooperate while doing the assessment. Then you may clarify queries of the child, but no help should be provided to answer. Remember, you're trying to assess the child, so don't give answers. If he has some questions, please clarify them for him, but don't give him the answers. Make a note of all observable behaviors like attention span, impulsivity, tendency to give up easily, anxiety, etc.
So if we just take care of all these points, there won't be much of problem in doing an informal assessment.
And this is something you can create by yourself, and it's a very close one-to-one association with the child, where you observe a lot of things, and I'm sure you'll learn a lot to help the child out in future.
Okay. So in today's discussion, our topic was informal assessment for children with learning disability. We started with what is an assessment, why is it needed. हमने इसमें बात की थी कि क्या क्या चीज़ें हमें ध्यान में रखनी चाहिए, जैसे कि जब हम जांच कर रहे हैं, जब हम असेसमेंट कर रहे हैं, तो हमें उसकी स्ट्रेंथ, उसकी वीकनेसेस पे ज़्यादा ध्यान देना है, जिससे कि हमें बाद में पता चल पाए कि हमें कहाँ पे ज़्यादा फोकस करना है, कहाँ ज़्यादा ध्यान दे के उसकी चीज़ें करेक्ट करवानी है. फिर हमने बात की थी कि क्या क्या डिफरेंट अप्रोचेज होती हैं एक असेसमेंट की. असेसमेंट 2 प्रकार के होते हैं, एक फॉर्मल और एक इनफॉर्मल. फॉर्मल होता है जिसके रूल्स ऑलरेडी सेट होते हैं, जो कुछ किसी बेसिस पे बना होता है ऑलरेडी, जिसको हम चेंज नहीं कर सकते हैं, और जो एक ट्रेंड प्रोफेशनल ही कर सकता है. फिर हमने बात की थी इनफॉर्मल, जो कि दूसरा प्रकार है, जिसमें कि कोई रूल सेट नहीं होता है. टीचर अपने हिसाब से और बच्चे की एबिलिटी के हिसाब से वो बना सकती है उस असेसमेंट को, एंड उसको वेरी भी कर सकती है. इसके डिफरेंट स्कोरिंग होती है, जो कि ध्यान में रखनी होती है हर टीचर को. फिर हमने बात की थी कि क्या क्या एरियाज हैं जो कि एक असेसमेंट के दौरान हमें ध्यान रखनी पड़ती हैं. विजुअल, ऑडिटरी, देन वी हैव द लैंग्वेज, देन द मैथ्स, एंड लास्ट इज द ग्राफोमोटर स्किल्स. पहले हमने बात की थी विजुअल के बारे में, जिसमें हमने बात किया था पहला फिगर ग्राउंड परसेप्शन. जैसे कि बताया था कि फिगर ग्राउंड परसेप्शन इज बैकग्राउंड और उसके आगे जो चीज है, उन दोनों में जब डिस्क्रिमिनेट कर दे बच्चा, तो उसका जो हम फिगर ग्राउंड परसेप्शन कहते हैं वो डेवलप्ड है. फिर हमने बात की थी फॉर्म कंसिस्टेंसी की, जिसमें कि जहाँ एक चीज जिस वे में सिखाई गई है, वो उसी चीज को डिफरेंट जगह पे भी वैसे ही परसीव करेगा, वैसे ही समझेगा. फिर हमने बात की थी विजुअल डिस्क्रिमिनेशन की, जिसमें कि 2 चीजों या उससे ज्यादा चीजों के बीच में वो अंतर कर पाएगा. फिर हमने बात की थी लास्ट में विजुअल क्लोजर की, जिसमें अगर किसी भी एक चीज का थोड़ा सा भाग दिखाया गया है वो उससे उस पूरी चीज के बारे में बता सकता है। फिर हमने बात की थी पोजीशन इन स्पेस के लिए। पोजीशन इन स्पेस के बारे में जब हम बात करते हैं तो उसमें कैसे एक बच्चे का जो ओरिएंटेशन है कैसे वो खड़ा है उसके बारे में, कि वो अगर उसको लेफ्ट का कॉन्सेप्ट होना चाहिए, राइट का कॉन्सेप्ट होना चाहिए, अप एंड डाउन का कॉन्सेप्ट होना चाहिए। फिर हमने बात की थी स्पेशल रिलेशनशिप की, जिसमें कि जो जिस बच्चे के बारे में हम बात कर रहे हैं वो बच्चा उसके रिगार्डिंग या उसके रिस्पेक्ट में उसके आसपास की चीजें कहाँ पे है, कि ये टेबल मेरे सामने है, ये कॉपी मेरे सामने रखी है और पीछे मेरे कर्टन है, ऐसे करके पता होना चाहिए। फिर उसके बाद हमने बात की थी विजुअल मेमोरी की, कि जब किसी चीज को वो देखता है तो उसको वो याद रखे। जैसे इसमें हमने बात की थी सीक्वेंसिंग की, कि एक बार एक स्टोरी को वो सीक्वेंस में लगा सके उसके डिफरेंट पार्ट्स को, एंड मेमोरी की। फिर हमने बात की थी ऑडिटरी परसेप्शन की। ऑडिटरी जैसे जो हमारी सुनने की क्षमता होती है उसके बेसिस पे जो डिफरेंट एरियाज हैं वो है ऑडिटरी फिगर ग्राउंड। जैसे हमने पहले विजुअल में बात की थी, इसमें वो बच्चा जो है एक जो बैकग्राउंड आवाज है जो पीछे से आवाज आ रही है और एक जो आवाज उसको जिस पे ध्यान देना उन दोनों के बीच में फर्क कर पाएगा। फिर हमने की थी ऑडिटरी डिस्क्रिमिनेशन की, जिसमें दो या दो से ज्यादा आवाजों के बीच में वो अंतर कर पाएगा। फिर हमने बात की थी ऑडिटरी ब्लेंडिंग की, जिसमें वो दो अगर उसे शब्द दे दिए गए तो उसे मिला सकता है, उसे मिक्स कर सकता है, ब्लेंड कर सकता है। जैसे हमने बात की थी मिल्क मैन एक साथ बोलेगा फिर हमने बात की थी ऑडिटरी एनालिसिस की, जिसमें ब्रेक डाउन करता है वो एक वर्ड को उसके अलग अलग साउंड्स बताने के लिए। फिर ऑडिटरी क्लोजर, कि उसे एक आवाज अगर सुनाई देती है तो उससे बता सकता है कि वो किसकी आवाज है और उसका डिस्क्रिप्शन दे सकता है। फिर हमने बात की थी ऑडिटरी मेमोरी की, कि जो सुना है वो उसको ध्यान में रखे और उसको याद रहता है कि वो कैसा साउंड करता है। फिर हमने बात की थी लैंग्वेज की, जिसमें रिसेप्टिव एंड एक्सप्रेसिव के बारे में हमने बात की थी। रिसेप्टिव जो कि एक बच्चा रिसीव करता है, जो एक बच्चा समझता है, जिसमें कि लिसनिंग एंड रीडिंग आता है। फिर हमने बात की थी एक्सप्रेसिव की, जिसमें कि वो कैसे एक्सप्रेस करता है, कैसे उस चीजों को बताता है, जिसमें कि राइटिंग एंड ओरली जो वो बोल के बता सकता है। फिर वी मूव्ड ऑन टू मैथ्स, जिसमें हमने प्री मैथ्स के बारे में बात की थी, जो बहुत बेसिक स्टेप्स होते हैं, लॉन्ग, शॉर्ट, स्मॉल, बिग का कॉन्सेप्ट। एंड व्हेन वी मूव ऑन टू द हायर क्लासेस, उसमें डिवीजन, मैथ्स, डिवीजन, एडिशन, मल्टीप्लिकेशन, सब्ट्रैक्शन, ये सब चीजों का कॉन्सेप्ट आता है। लास्टली वी मूव्ड ऑन टू द ग्राफोमोटर स्किल्स, जिसमें कि हैंड राइटिंग, फिर उसका विजुअल परसेप्शन, देन वी मूव्ड ऑन टू द मेमोरी एंड द मोटर कोऑर्डिनेशन। ये सारी चीजें एक जो स्किल्स होती हैं, डिफरेंट स्किल्स होती हैं, ये वाली इनको बोलते हैं ग्राफोमोटर स्किल्स। ये चीजें उसकी डेवलप होनी चाहिए, नहीं होती हैं तो इट माइट कॉज, ये एक रीजन हो सकता है लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटी का। फिर लास्टली हमने बात की थी पॉइंट्स टू रिमेम्बर, क्या क्या एक असेसमेंट के दौरान, एक इनफॉर्मल असेसमेंट के दौरान एक टीचर को या जो भी असेसमेंट कर रहा है उसको ध्यान में रखनी चाहिए। पहले तो जो बच्चे का क्लास लेवल है उस हिसाब से असेसमेंट बनना चाहिए। सेकंड, जो भी असेसमेंट करा जा रहा है वो बच्चे के एक जो उसका स्टेटस है उस समय उसको भी ध्यान में रखना चाहिए। जरूरी नहीं है कि असेसमेंट एक सेशन में ही खत्म हो जाए। बच्चा थक गया है तो द सेशन कैन टेक 2-3 डेज ऑल्सो। फिर एक रैपो अच्छा बिल्ड होना चाहिए, उससे उसका इंटरेक्शन अच्छे से होना चाहिए। फिर हमने बात की थी कि जब भी हम असेसमेंट कर रहे हैं, अगर उसे हम कोई एक्टिविटी दी है तो हम उसकी हेल्प कर सकते हैं, बट उस एक्टिविटी में उसका आंसर नहीं दे सकते हैं, उसके कोई भी क्वेरी को हम सॉल्व कर सकते हैं। लास्टली वी टॉक्ड अबाउट कि हमें ऑब्जर्वेशंस जो भी हमारे उसके बिहेवियर पर हैं वो बहुत ध्यान में रखनी चाहिए। तो दीज आर द डिफरेंट टॉपिक्स वी हैड टॉक्ड अबाउट आज की कन्वर्सेशन में। I'd like to thank our expert. उन्होंने अपना precious time निकाला and she shared her valuable information with us. That is all for our today's conversation and our conference. I hope you liked our show. Thank you for watching us.